development in the controversy surrounding YouTuber Ranveer Allahbadia. The Supreme Court has granted interim protection from arrest to Ranveer Allahbadia in FIRs filed in Mumbai, Guwahati and Jaipur over alleged obscenity on the show India's Got Latent. But the court came down heavily on Allahbadia, calling his remarks shameful, perverted and completely unacceptable. Justice Kant asked if this is not obscenity, then what is? And added that his statements reflected a perverted mind. A bench of Justices Surya Kant and N. Koteshwar Singh issued a notice on his plea to club the FIRs and barred fresh cases on the same matter. However, the court made it clear that this protection was conditional, and on his full cooperation with the investigation, his lawyer, Abhinav Chandrachud, acknowledged that the comments were disgusting, but argued that they did not amount to a criminal offence. And to discuss this further, I'm joined by our guest this evening. I'm joined by a stand-up artist, Daniel Fernandez, right now. Mr. Fernandez, thank you so much for taking your time and joining us over here at Mirror Now.
Hi, Samay. Always a pleasure.
Not too long ago, Mr. Fernandez, you were also faced with a similar predicament where there was a section that took offense to certain parts, certain content of your act. How do you look at the judgment today? How far is too far, Mr. Fernandez?
I think it's just silly overall. I'm sure there are more pressing issues that are of national interest in this country. And here, all of us have come to a standstill over a silly question. Not even a joke. That wasn't even meant to be a joke, by the way. It was a silly question asked on a show that was behind a paywall, right? So, especially when you consider the other content that people have access to on OTTs, it's way more obscene, so to say, compared to anything that Ranveer may have said on Latent. So I think this is just another case of smoke and mirrors, just to keep stirring the pot, keep the citizens distracted, and then just stir up silly sentiments, of morals and stuff like that. When you look at our own nation, our own language, the way we speak, two of the most popular profanities in India reference incest against a mother or a sister. And here we are trying to be flag bearers of, morality, saying this is perverted, that is perverted. And it's always a comedian. It's always a comedian or an influencer or an easy target. It's never a politician. Politicians, again, have said far worse things and no one outrages. So for me, this is just something that we've all gotten used to as an industry. Every 6 months, somebody will get worked up about something that we said. We are easy targets. That we talk about where our shows are, etc., etc. So people find it very convenient within the comfort of their air-conditioned rooms and in their chaddis. They can just make a phone call to a venue, threaten somebody. So it's a waste of time. It's a waste of resources. And I think India as a nation deserves better things to outrage about.
Mr. Fernandez, when you talk about dark comedy, you somewhere master the art of dark comedy in your stand-up acts. But when it comes to the comic space and the freedom of expression, do you feel that there should be some sense of social responsibility that the content creators need to be mindful of?
We keep getting asked this question very often in terms of responsibility as artists. I think everybody needs to take responsibility. Art is subjective. What is funny or to someone may not be funny to others. And similarly with other art forms as well. I don't think that we should curtail how any artist expresses themselves. I think we should, as adults, take responsibility for the art that we consume. Nobody is forcing anybody to watch anything that is being created here. If you're a fan, you want to watch my work, go ahead. If you're not a fan, if it's not for you, that's fine as well. But if I have to agree that we as artists should curtail ourselves, then even the audience or the people who are angry should also take a few steps back and evaluate how they express their unhappiness. Threatening somebody with murder, threatening somebody with rape, storming into Ranveer's mother's clinic. What does that say about us as a society collectively? So why is it always about the artist having to take responsibility? When are the citizens going to take responsibility for what they watch and consume? Personally, uh, I don't believe in censorship of any sort. I've always found a way to say what I want to say, and not just dark humor. There are so many different genres of comedy, so many amazing comedians saying really good things. But again, having a sense of humor should not be confused with the ability to laugh. Okay, you won't find everything funny. We may not agree with a certain comedian's jokes, but that doesn't mean there aren't people who do. And Latent has proven that it has a massive following, right? The proof is in the pudding. So somewhere we all have to question ourselves, not just the artists.
But Mr. Fernandez, that's where my next question stems from. Is because you
Mhm.
have a massive following. By you, I mean there are several other such content creators, YouTubers, podcasters. There are also
Yeah,
several impressionable minds, if I can term them. They all
yeah.
follow them, they all consume this content online. That is where
Hmm.
the question of responsibility comes from, because what people are arguing is that if content creators can regulate themselves, if there is some sense of self regulation, then there will be no need to put across any censorship for the OTT or any guidelines that the content creators will have to adhere to. What do you have to say about
But
that?
then who? But then who makes the rules? Who decides what is acceptable and what is not? That's where it becomes a very slippery slope. And as far as impressionable minds are concerned, impressionable minds are not just accessing our videos; they're watching what politicians are saying. And again, I come back to this: who's going to hold the politicians accountable for the things that they say? Are they not making an impression on the younger citizens of the country? I mean, go to Twitter right now. There are kids between 17 to 21 just abusing women left, right, and center, threatening them with rape and violence. So this is something that's been happening a lot. So it isn't just about uh, us trying to like take some sort of sense of responsibility and say, oh, we should curtail what we are going to say because a 10-year-old might watch this. I think everybody in every location with access to the internet or a mobile phone should either self-regulate, or if the person in question is a minor, then the parents' responsibility. I challenge anybody who's watching this right now, go to OTT, go to any OTT and look at some of the content that's available out there. There are explicit sex scenes that a 5-year-old with a remote control and no parental controls on your OTT can go watch right now, which is far worse than anything Samay may or Ranveer may have said. This is true. Go check it out right now. Where is the outrage against
But
Alt
Mr.
Balaji
Fernandez,
for the
then
kind
do
of
you
stuff
know
he
it
does?
does open a Pandora's box over here? It's because then you are
Yes.
equipping the government, the state to step in to try and regulate the content on social media, OTT platform, Instagram,
Yeah.
Facebook,
Yeah.
Twitter, YouTube. What's going to happen then to all these comics and artists who are pretty much making their living out of these spaces? Do you feel that there is a need for the state to factor that in as well? Because it is a source of livelihood for many.
Yes. And that is where the citizens need to come in, right? You can't, this obviously is looking like a play to bring a regulation bill into our space of work. But at the same time, uh, it isn't something that is only going to be up to the artists. It's going to be up to the people who also consume, sorry, the art, right? Because irrespective of what guidelines may be framed, what if there's no guarantee that the people watching our stuff will not find something else outrageous, right? There was a few years ago, somebody got angry about a joke over DJs, and then 500 DJs showed up to a venue and threatened the venue. So where do we draw the line? It's just this just seems like a party for mad people.
But Mr. Fernandez, you know what may be funny and a content that could be possibly fit for a Western part of the world for that audience may not be true for the Indian audience. But the government is saying that you need to be sensitive to the Indian sensibility. A joke
I
gone
don't.
too far is the reason
Yeah.
why today Samay Raina and Ranveer Allahbadia have to face this predicament.
See, I don't agree with this comparison to the West because there are stupid people in the West also. Look at who the president of America is right now. So the West should not be any standard of intelligence in any way whatsoever. I think India is a beautiful, diverse country with diverse cultures and sentiments. But what is happening right now is we are allowing people in power to manipulate a few thousand people across the country or on Twitter into bullying artists and actors and sports persons every now and then to suit their own agenda. There are stupid people everywhere. I think, and we need to give Indians more credit. I've performed all over the world, and let me tell you, Indian audiences are some of the smartest you will find anywhere on this planet. They are up to date. They know their current affairs. They're clued in on pop culture. Comedians who visit India from other countries marvel at how smart the Indian audience is. So I take nothing away from the country that I live in and the audience that I perform to. It's just again, like I said, it's the a few thousand people who are just stirring the entire nation up into a frenzy unnecessarily. This is a waste of time.
Before I let go of you, Mr. Fernandez, one last question is that while you are terming this to be a case of selective outrage of sorts, what do you make when the court comes up with a strong diktat and disallows you from even having shows? Now, shows is the way of life for many of the
Yes.
stand-up artists like you yourself, Mr. Fernandez.
Yes, and I don't agree with that at all. I don't think any artist should be barred from making a living through whatever means necessary as long as it's legal. So to say that a comedian should not perform anywhere because certain people didn't like his jokes. First of all, this is a live show. You have to buy a ticket and go to the venue to see if you don't like this guy. Why are you taking all that trouble? So if you are not going to go watch this guy anyway, what is the problem with him then making a living? Right? Let him make a living. If you don't want to watch his show, don't watch. But there are thousands of people all over the country who want to watch these shows. Right? There are a lot of other creators who say things we don't agree with, but we don't, stop them from, making a living. Politicians keep saying horrendous things. They still get elected to office. So why shouldn't, creators who are literally no threat to anybody right now be stopped from earning a living? These are the questions we need to be asked.
Point taken, Mr. Daniel Fernandez. Thank you so much for taking our time and joining us over here at Mirror Now. And now, of course, we're getting you some more information about Ranveer Allahbadia, the manner in which the top court has spoken about the content that was generated by the reality show and the ongoing controversy surrounding Ranveer Allahbadia's vulgar remarks. The Supreme Court today made a key observation while hearing the podcaster's plea seeking relief from arrest. The top court said that there is an urgent need to regulate online platforms like YouTube, arguing that content creators are misusing the lack of oversight. Stressing on the need to do something, the Supreme Court urged Centre to come up with a solution, warning them of taking matters in their own hands and filling the vacuum that presently exists.
This was also a fallout of the India's Got Latent Vulgar Language, Obscene Language row. Immediately after Ranveer Allahbadia hearing, the Justice Suryakant took up the issue with Additional Solicitor General Aishwarya Bhatti, asking what this centre has done so far despite several Supreme Court and High Court orders to pull down obscene, vulgar content on YouTube and other social media, including OTT. And the fact that Supreme Court has taken this issue very seriously is evident from the fact that the Supreme Court has roped in two topmost law officers of the country, that is the Attorney General R. Venkatramani and Solicitor General of India Tushar Mehta, who has been asked to assist the Supreme Court in this very important issue on the next date. In 4 weeks, the centre has to respond as to what steps they have already taken, and next date, these two top law officers have to brief the Supreme Court as to what they have done with the past orders of the Supreme Court and various high courts of the country to ensure that this India's Got Latent Ranveer Allahbadia type comments do not pass through social media and is not aired by channels like YouTube. So Supreme Court has taken very, very serious view as far as this issue is concerned.
And to discuss this further, I'm joined by senior advocate Mr. Sanjay Hegde over here with us. Thank you so much, Mr. Hegde, for taking our time and joining us here at Mirror Now. Mr. Hegde, I will begin by asking, is there free speech? Is there free space for content like what was put across at India's Got Latent, because Supreme Court's strong observation also has instructed the state, the government, to step in to regulate this vacuum that is there on the social media platforms.
I don't think the Supreme Court has asked for legislation as yet. The Supreme Court has said that we have said these things many times. It wants to be informed as to what the government has done. And based on that, the Supreme Court may or may not pass orders. Yes, the Supreme Court, while granting bail, has also expressed the general, if not anguish, the general distaste that community standards have for such kind of speech. These observations must be seen as being preliminary in nature because the matter has not been finally heard, and we do not know what will finally come out in the judgment. The point is that the Allahbadia comments were made on a limited platform. You had to subscribe in order to access such content. Now, if the Supreme Court were to say that you cannot air such, you cannot upload such things from India, what will simply happen is that most of this content will migrate to other platforms, and it will still be available to Indians through things like VPNs. I do not know how far the Supreme Court would require the government to create a walled garden in which tender eyes and ears of Indians have to be protected against bad jokes.
Okay, Mr. Hegde, but a short while ago, I was in conversation with one of the stand-up artists also, Mr. Daniel Fernandez, and he very categorically put it out there that you always have a choice to decide what you want to watch. Nobody is forcing anybody to watch anything on these social media platforms. And while it is upon every individual, not only the social media content generators, to act responsibly, but for everybody to have some sense of responsibility when they're conducting themselves, even when it comes to viewing the online content.
Well, he may have his views, but my point is simply this, that when you speak of free speech, what do you mean? You do not need protection for popular speech. If I were to say that Mirror Now is such a great channel, etc., 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 that's popular speech. Nobody will object to it. Nobody can object to it. But if I were to say something about this channel or about some other lawyer or some other comedian, then it would be subject to defamation and various other provisions. It is only unpopular speech, sometimes even unpleasant speech, that requires the constitutional guarantees of free speech. Now, unless a speech incites violence, unless a speech is so lacking in all merit that it only addresses the prurient interests of the possibly feeble-minded with no redeeming virtue whatsoever, most speech should be allowed. That is why I emphasize that the Supreme Court's observations must be seen as preliminary observations. You may remember that the same judges, while hearing the Nupur Sharma case, made some very strong observations about her on the first hearing. But later, those observations did not come reflected in later orders.
Absolutely, Mr. Hegde. Well, thank you for taking your time and sharing your views and putting things into perspective as far as the legal aspect is concerned. We shall wrap this conversation over here. And with that, we are slipping into a short break right now. Lots more lined up. Stay tuned and keep